something I've been thinking about. I can send you a short article that I've written, which touches on Petrie's eugenic ideas. So the problem is, whether it's Edward Colston or Flinders Petrie or whoever, these people are, of course, three-dimensional individuals. They did lots of things in their lives. The thing with Petrie is he really is praised as the father of Egyptian archaeology, and it's a very kind of paternalistic, quite patronizing style he's got to him. And as I've highlighted in writing, some of my own writing recently, he has these quite objectionable views about not just people in Egypt, but about British society. So it's fair to say, amongst a significant number of people at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a belief that British society, the stock, and he uses that term stock, could be improved. And so he talks about this in particularly a little book called Revolutions of Civilization. So this kind of comes off the back of a lot of time spent in Egypt, obviously, when he's doing Egyptian archaeology. So he talks about how he seems to say mixing of the races is a good thing because it produces civilizational advancement, okay? But then, so he says in Egypt, people were a bit stupid until a new race came in, and this prompted the pyramids and, you know, big civilizational strides forward. But then he says, well, we don't really want to get too much mixing now. This would compromise the intellectual future of humanity. So it's all quite contradictory, actually. It has an internal contradiction in it. But there is a modern connection where I think you can say some of these ideas are still present, sadly, with us. Now, let me get this right. Dominic Cummings, recently, up until recently, you know, a government advisor, unelected, but very close to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
His grandfather-in-law or his father-in-law at the start of the pandemic was quoted, it might have been an older interview, but was quoted, and you can see footage of it, talks about how some people are more susceptible to getting viruses and how some people really are of better stock and are healthier and should be protected in some way. And it comes from eugenics. And the interesting thing is, this guy, so Dominic Cummings' father-in-law, is, I think, the grandson or the great-grandson of a guy called Evelyn Baring, who was ennobled as Lord Cromer, and he was the British consul in Egypt and Sudan. So absolutely part of the imperial network, front and centre. Petrie goes to his his farewell drinks in 1907 in Cairo. So the idea that archaeology is in some way independent of politics, or, you know, it doesn't engage with politics, I think is nonsense. Mm-hmm. Archaeology is very much a bedfellow of politics and imperialism and all the other stuff. So that is an example where those eugenic ideas are being spouted by someone close to someone in the public eye.
And so they're still kind of present because he's going to have been in contact with his grandparents and with those kind of ideas.
Yeah, sure. Exactly, yeah.
Cool. So have you seen about sorry, 1 second. Oh yeah. So have you seen about prenatal screening in the United States?
Yes.
They'll kind of select discover kind of like deficiencies in children before they're born and decide to abort them. Would you say that is a form of modern eugenics?
Yeah, I would say it is. Of course, there's a broad scope to it, but yes, the idea that you can that there are things which it is perceived that you can improve.
Mm.
is on human beings. It does seem to be eugenics, linking to the building that you're virtually standing in. So two people. One of Flinders Petrie's students, Margaret Murray, is a very interesting case because she's an early suffragette, she's an Egyptologist, she's a folklorist, she's a practicing witch, she lives to be 100. She has an autobiography called My First 100 Years. Very interesting person. She has in her possession at some point Petrie's craniometer, which is, what you use to measure skulls. And that is absolutely from the same idea, that you can measure skulls as a way of tracking. I mean, it's completely spurious that you can measure skulls. Sorry?
His like race casts kind of things that he collected from statues in Egypt. And
yes, he does that as well in two-dimensional art. And that, I mean, a lot of Egyptologists kind of have tried to sweep that under the carpet because it's so embarrassing. But the craniometry is for use on the skulls of ancient Egyptians that he finds in his excavations, but also for measuring the skulls of children in British schools, in Edwardian Victorian England, with the belief that you can track certain undesirable qualities and breed them out. So, this connects from Margaret Murray to someone else who's famous in the university, but has a slightly problematic history, and that's Marie Stopes. So she is praised as someone who, gave women the option of birth control and what to do with their own bodies. Mm-hmm. But she also believed that the reason you would be choosing to not have children might not have been a choice at all. It might have been because you were not of a desirable stock of people. So Margaret Murray and Marie Stopes are, they used to be on the hoardings of buildings on the campus as, great women to celebrate, but it's not always entirely clear, like anyone, what the background was. Sorry, what was the question again there? Finally, I've seemed to have gone off it.
That was the one to do with prenatal screening, but it kind of leads in nicely to whether or not you think Flinders Petrie's ideas on eugenics are still present in modern Egyptology because of his influence on the subject of Egyptology. Have those ideas transferred as well?
Oh, good question. Ultimately, yes, because Petrie is, like a lot of archaeologists, he directs the excavations conducted by Egyptians and he gets the praise for it. But like a lot of those early excavators, the things he finds and the things he publishes instantly become facts. So even if he's not talking directly about skull measurement and race, a lot of his ideas cast very long shadows. So even if you look at, there's plenty of examples. If you look at any kind of news story about mummy scanning or the heritage of the ancient Egyptians, Flinders Petrie's influence definitely to be seen. And again, it's just a problem in archaeology. We think of these things as kind of mathematical equations that you can put in different factors and you can come out with an answer, a definite, truthful answer. That's very Petrie in style, but I think it's a lot of bollocks, frankly, myself.
Nice. Well, so you know how Petrie came up with the idea of race casts and how different races entered early Egyptian society, and that's what kind of stimulated the growth and development of Egypt. Would you say the Egyptian concept of Ma'at, that there was no real distinction between race, only Egyptians and non-Egyptians, which was a kind of cultural distinction, would you say that undermines the notion or like any kind of like racial ideas that we impose onto our idea of Egypt.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I like the way you've phrased that. Petrie and other people go and look at ancient Egyptian art with the eyes of colonial people, and they assume the ancient Egyptians' attitude to race is the same as Edwardian, Victorian, elite British middle class men. So you're right. Yeah, this concept, although I think even the concept of Ma'at is seen through modern eyes, so it's so difficult to get to some real understanding of what the Egyptians believed. I think you're right. Basically, the Egyptians themselves consider that they are a special people, a chosen people. Anything that is outside of Egypt is something else. And so that undermines the whole idea of an Egyptian empire. Petrie talks about empire, like they're trying to build an empire. They don't really care about having an empire. Sure, they want to get stuff from outside of Egypt, and they'll beat people up to do it. But that's not the same as the British having India. It's not the same. Although the language that Petrie and others apply to the Egyptian empire is very similar to the British empire. But in answer to your question, yeah, I think the point is there are non-Egyptians, and there are different stylized hieroglyphic ways of representing those other people, and it does not, to my mind, does not represent the same racial anxieties that we have in modern times. There is evidence of people who are not Egyptian living quite happily in Egyptian settlements, but that's not reflected in the state ideology, which Petrie read as racist and as a kind of a justification of racism, where the Egyptians are beating up foreigners. That's just an idea. That's just like a theological idea, as you say, related to the idea of order and chaos.
So it's more to do with imperialism imposing itself on the past rather than
absolutely. Definitely, absolutely.